this in here.
Joining me on the line, he is from the ProFootballNetwork.com. We'll have links and all that over at the website, kggo.com. Ian Cummings is on the line. Hey, Ian, what's going on today?
Nothing much, man. Just, midway through finals week and NFL draft week, so it's been pretty busy, but managing well. It's funny, I actually called in an hour early for this thing, so I was a little too eager, but I mean, you can make it work. It's a fun week as always, and as we've seen, on Twitter and whatever social you have, I'm sure you've seen. I mean, there's a lot of different storylines that are kind of clashing together, and we really don't know what's going to happen. So a lot to talk about, even with just one day remaining before the draft.
All right, so the draft is tomorrow night. Let's get into this. What's kind of the big story right now? Because, you always have the, who's going to go first, and this team might, trade with this team. What's the story right now?
Right now, the biggest story is the third pick. The 49ers obviously traded up to get to that point, and everyone wants to know what they're going to do because they're basically the gatekeepers for the NFL draft. I mean, what happens there kind of dictates how the rest of the top 10 and potentially how the rest of the first round goes. Now, we know they're going to pick a quarterback, but who they prefer at that pick still kind of up in the air. I know Adam Schefter released an update today that said they were trying to decide between Mac Jones and Trey Lance. So let's say they pick, Trey Lance. Do the Falcons pick Justin Fields or Mac Jones, or do they trade back, or do they pick Kyle Pitts? So the third and fourth picks, and mainly what the 49ers do, it kind of leads to everything else. So that's the biggest storyline, is what is Kyle Shanahan doing? I mean, he traded up to get to that point, and the 49ers really need to hit because they need to get back into contention. They need to maximize this contention window that they have before it fades away. And ultimately, you need to make the right decision there because Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't it. And if they don't get an upgrade, it could just be more years of limbo for that franchise. So you really need to make sure you hit on that third pick. So we'll see what they do. But that's the biggest storyline because of how much is consequential to that storyline, but also how important it is for the 49ers themselves to make it work.
Hey, with a team like the 49ers in mind, when they're like you said, they're looking for a quarterback. Does it almost make more sense to go out and get a guy that's experienced and just plug him in, or do you think they can really find a guy in the draft that will fit what they want?
I would always err against picking a guy who's experienced because to me that seems like, maybe you can win with those guys, but it seems a little more aligning with complacency.
Okay.
Like, we don't have to go all out and get the guy who has the elite physical traits in the draft. We can get a guy who's been there, done that, but they've never been there, done that in the Super Bowl. Maybe they never won a Super Bowl, or maybe they did and they got carried. I don't know. I saw a report earlier today that the 49ers were actually trying to get Andy Dalton or Joe Flacco. Now, you asked me, would
Andy
I prefer
Dalton.
I know, seriously, right? Would I prefer going with Andy Dalton or Joe Flacco, or rolling the dice and potentially getting a quarterback who can actually lead your team to the promised land? I'm taking the latter because I do not want to settle and find out that the guy I have simply isn't good enough. At least when you take a rookie with the upside, you don't know, and he could get you there.
Yeah.
So I think I would for sure. I would err on that side of it.
Not everybody can be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year.
Yeah, for sure.
Not everybody could just bring in Brady and win a Super Bowl. So Ian Cummings from the ProFootballNetwork.com joining me on the line right now. We'll have the links over at the website. If that's the big story, what's the kind of dark horse story you're kind of following that you think could make a world of difference, especially in the first round?
Okay, well, yeah, there are a few for sure. I think what the Dolphins do kind of bears noticing, kind of bears watching, because at number 6, they're presumably going to have their pick of the top playmaker on the board, whether it's Kyle Pitts, Devontae Smith, Jamar Chase, if the Bengals don't take him, or Penei Sewell, if the Bengals don't take him, or Jalen Waddle, who's my preference for the Dolphins, specifically what they need. But it all depends on who they take, and then that will cause the rest of the playmakers. And, maybe if Penei Sewell somehow drops below that point, how does the rest of that play out? That's a big clump of talent right there that's going to get pushed down because of all the quarterbacks that are projected to go early on. And so how that plays out, it kind of like the draft starts there, essentially, because all those guys, it depends on where the quarterbacks go. That pushes them down the board, and then it's up to preference for the next few teams. And the Dolphins kind of have their first pick of the litter there. It seems like the Bengals are going to go either Chase or Sewell. That's kind of been the conversation all offseason.
Okay.
The Dolphins are still going to have a big pool of talent to choose from, and so they'll start it off, and then the rest of the board will play out. I also think what the Carolina Panthers do bears noticing too, because they traded for Sam Darnold. They traded a second rounder and a fourth rounder next year, and then a sixth rounder this year. So that's a pretty sizable investment for Darnold if you think about it. And then we thought that they were going to accept his fifth-year option. They haven't done that yet. I think they're going to wait until after the draft if they do it. But if a quarterback like Justin Fields falls, you have to think, are they going to pick him there? So a lot of different fluctuating storylines too. And, I throw this in here. A lot of it is mainly around the quarterbacks, because in this league, you need a quarterback to win for sure. And so there are teams also like the Bears. They signed Andy Dalton. They're the ones who got stuck with him. And, with Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy kind of, almost they're kind of have one foot out if they don't make it work this year. So I wouldn't want to go out swinging with Andy Dalton. I'll tell you that right now. If I can go all in, try and get a quarterback who has that potential to take you where you need to go.
Yeah.
They might be aggressive and trade up for a guy, or maybe Washington. They signed Ryan Fitzpatrick, but they have a solid roster, and in Fitzpatrick, a guy who could be a mentor for one of these top 4 quarterbacks. So maybe if someone drops to 7 or 8, they trade up to get Justin Fields or Mac Jones. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But most of it revolves around the quarterbacks and the demand for quarterbacks and how that's going to influence what teams do.
Does a lot of that go with the changing of the league, of how it's, offense kind of fluctuates over the years?
Yeah, I would say so. I think in the past, if you had a ball control offense, just pound the rock, just keep it on the ground, keep the volatility of the game out of it, then you could win. But now teams are getting more creative, and the impact of the quarterback, if he can do more, then your offense can do more. It's really that simple. And you've seen that with Patrick Mahomes. You've seen that with Tom Brady, not so much physically, but he's just such an elite processor that his offense can do a lot. But there's only one Tom Brady. It's easier to find more elite athletes and hope that they can be that guy, and then they can couple it with very good processing. So that's kind of where it's going. And if your quarterback can do more, your offense is just more flexible, more versatile, more unpredictable. And that makes it really tough for defenses who are constantly in this chase to constantly adapt and innovate, and they don't always catch up. So I think since the league is trending toward offense, and since it's so important to get that quarterback, you can't just trot out Trent Dilfer and win a Super Bowl anymore. That's not how it's going to work anymore. You need a talented quarterback more often than not. And if you try to settle with a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, more often than not, you're going to fall just a little bit short, and you're going to end up looking for another guy later on.
Ian Cummings from ProFootballNetwork.com. Since you called me early, I've got a couple questions that aren't on the sheet we sent.
All right, I'm cool with that.
All right. So beyond the first pick of the draft, okay, what is your guaranteed this is going to happen, mark my words pick?
Ooh,
right. Yeah. That's what you get for being an hour early, Ian.
This is what I get. I'm reaping the not so much rewards of calling an hour early, but I think if I had to pick one, and I might be cheating here because I'm not saying it's going to be one guy. It's one of 2 guys, but I think the Dallas Cowboys.
I'll give you that.
All right. Yeah. Give me that. Just give me that. Throw me a bone here. But, yeah, I think the Cowboys at 10, I think it's either between Patrick Surtain or J.C. Horn.
Okay.
South Carolina quarterback J.C. Horn or Alabama's Patrick Surtain at corner, because they definitely need a lot of help on defense, period. But I think the value of the board really stacks up well for them at corner. And J.C. Horn is my personal CB1. I really like, he tested as an elite athlete. He has 33-inch arms, which you really love to see. He can be really disruptive at the catch point, but also an elite athlete and an elite competitor. I mean, he's always jawing at guys. He's super aggressive at the contact point. So that combination of elite athleticism and proactivity as a playmaker is what makes him on my board just a little bit higher than Surtain. But looking at Surtain too, he's also an elite athlete, and he's more of a, he's more of a boring corner. That sounds bad, but it's good at cornerback to be boring, just like it's good on the offensive line to be boring because you're not getting penetration. At corner, Patrick Surtain is really good. He can just drape guys. He's super smart, super fluid. I think Horn's a little bit better when it comes to being disruptive, but I still really like Surtain as that guy. And if the Cowboys, it kind of depends on whether they're going to play more man or more zone. I think if they play more man, J.C. Horn would be the guy. If they play more zone, Surtain. But I think both of those guys are relatively versatile. So it really just comes down to personal preference for them. But I think it will be one of those 2 guys. There's been some reports that they really like Kyle Pitts, but they have Blake Jarwin. They have Dalton Schultz, who played really well in Jarwin's absence last year at tight end. So I don't really think they need to go tight end. As much as I love Pitts, I'm a huge fan of Pitts. He's my number 2 overall prospect. But I don't think, especially with all the weapons Dallas already has on their offense, I think you have to go defense. And one of those 2 corners might be the pick there.
Yeah, but let's face it, Dallas is going to find a way to screw it up.
They will, inevitably. And I'm okay with that. Personally, I'm okay with that. But you never know. And I love J.C. Horn, so I would love for him to work out. But it takes more than that. So they're going to have to couple that with some good picks on day 2. But that would be a good start for them. I'll have to see them that, if nothing else.
The Cowboys will find a way. We'll guarantee that. Ian Cummings from Pro Football Network. .com joining me on the line. As we do get down to it, I always think the question's interesting. You always hear who needs to have a great draft, which I do want to know who you think needs to have that great draft, but who can get away with having an average, or they just kind of like, we'll roll the dice on a couple things and just see what happens. Who needs a great draft? Who doesn't need a great draft this year?
That's a really interesting question, and it's kind of it's fun to think about because ideally all 32 teams would have a stellar draft. Okay?
Yeah,
but
that's what you want, but let's face it, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So thinking about teams that can afford a bad draft, I would probably say the Packers, just because they had a bad draft last year and it didn't really hurt them. So maybe they could afford to have another one as long as Aaron Rodgers is still in his peak, which he played. He won the MVP. Okay, he's probably one of the best, if not the best, quarterback in the game right now. So maybe they can afford another one, and Aaron Rodgers can carry his team to another playoff run. Again, it's not ideal, but maybe they could withstand that. Other teams potentially, I'm thinking maybe the Falcons. It's kind of weird.
Really?
That dichotomy, the Packers and the Falcons. But I think the Falcons, they have a ton of needs, okay? They have a ton of needs. They're not going to compete this year. They're not going to compete next year. So you're in kind of a low-risk situation where, you're not really risking a contention window if it's not there. So you can kind of roll the dice on some high upside guys, hope to develop them. If it doesn't work out, recoup your losses next year. And you still have Matt Ryan for, I think, until 2023. And we don't know if they're going to move on from him.
Yeah.
So it kind of feels like they're in limbo, and they're not going to make drastic steps in the next 2 years. So there is some flexibility for you to kind of swing for the fences this year. And if it doesn't work out, at least you said to yourself, we tried our best. And I think they could maybe afford that. If they were really gunning to compete in year 1, then I wouldn't say that, but they have kind of a longer rebuild window. So in the first year of the rebuild, they don't need to get everything right. It's more just kind of trial and error. What's going to work for us? What's not going to work? So I could see that.
See, I wish more teams would take that approach where, you look at, like the Browns over so many years where it's quarterback after quarterback after quarterback. Like at some point you go, try something else. Just, you know what? It's not working. Let's build up the rest of the team where all you need is an average quarterback to get you to where you want to go.
For sure. And
we need superstar power. Well, you think winning is going to hurt your franchise? Probably not.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of teams think they can just start winning with one pick, and that's not how it happens. Like, you really need to work toward it, and it's a long process that takes time. And I think the Falcons are in a situation where they can accept that and accept that they don't have to get every single little thing right at this point in their rebuild. They can experiment a little bit. So they're another one for me. I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that's kind of a gimme, right? Because they're already so good. They're bringing back literally everyone. So, they can afford to kind of play around. It's basically a joke for them. They're probably laughing as they put each pick in, we're getting even stronger. Haha. So
Tom Brady's going to be like, I'm actually going to throw the Super Bowl trophy in the game. Wait
exactly.
Just
when you thought you'd seen everything.
Exactly. Who's the one team that needs a great draft this year? I know that's the question everybody asks, but you have to ask.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I have a few teams on my list. I think San Francisco for sure. We already went over that though. I won't dwell on that too much. I think Miami personally. And I don't think they need to get everything perfect because they do have a ton of picks. All right, but Tua Tagovailoa is heading into his second year, okay, and you spent a first rounder on him. You've already invested that first rounder, so you need to make sure you do everything you can to make him successful. And they traded away Eric Flowers. They're potentially moving Robert Hunt to guard. There is some uncertainty on that offensive line, so I think they need to kind of lock that down, that protection unit. One of the most important things for making sure a franchise quarterback can fulfill his upside. So I think they need to lock that down. They need another running back too, and they need an edge rusher, and they need more weapons in the passing core because they have Devontae Parker, Preston Williams, they signed Will Fuller, but I think they need more separation, more run after catch propensity. So it's really important to them that they get that because they're in a tough division. I mean, the Jets with Robert Saleh, I think can, maybe not this year, but I think they will be trending up soon. And the Buffalo Bills, I mean, they're going to be one of the Super Bowl contenders this year. And then the Patriots, potentially, I don't think the Patriots are a threat, but with Buffalo already so good and with the Jets potentially turning a new leaf, if you're Miami, you really can't afford to take a step back after you were on the cusp of the playoffs. So I think it's really important for them that they make the most of the assets they have. Some other teams that I listed, Chicago and Minnesota, both in the NFC North. Minnesota with Mike Zimmer, again, they haven't had a ton of playoff success, so I think the clock is ticking there. And then, of course, Chicago with Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. We mentioned earlier, they really need to get this quarterback situation right, because after the whole Trubisky debacle, their leash is shortening too. So just mainly when you look at the teams that need a great draft,
everybody, from what you said there.
Yeah, basically everybody, I know, right? But if you really, if you're going to press me even further and say I need to be more specific, which, hey, I would encourage you to do that, okay? That is my duty.
I said one team, Ian, one team. You rattled off half the AFC.
You got to know, that's good. You got to say 0.2 teams, man. Then I'll correct the one. There we go. But I think,
Bengals. See, there, I answered it. No, that's good stuff. Ian Cummings from ProFootballNetwork.com joining me on the line. Ian, tomorrow night when the draft is happening, what are you going to be doing?
I'm going to be writing a ton. Well, first off, I'm going to be happy that my finals are over. I have one more final tomorrow. It's an accounting one. I hate accounting with a burning passion. It's probably in my top 3 things I hate all time. So I'll have to get through that. And then once I do, a lot of writing. I'll be doing draft grades for PFN for a few teams. I can't remember which teams. I got to check. I got to double check. I know Washington and I think Detroit are 2 of them.
Okay.
But I'll double check. Finals are kind of taking away my attention right now, but then also I'll probably just more of that, and I'll have a mock draft out the day after the draft.
Okay.
And on Saturday there'll be a 2022 mock draft, so kind of taking a look at next year already. I know I wanted a break too, but they were just like, no, we're doing this, right? So no, I'm kidding. I really appreciate the opportunity to look forward. So it's always it never really ends, the evaluation process. So
no,
that's
doesn't.
kind of what I'll be.
I was talking to one of our local sports guys yesterday, and we were both talking about 2022 for, especially here in the state of Iowa, that Iowa State is just going to dominate that draft.
Dude, they have so much talent. I mean, Brock Purdy, Breece Hall, those are just 2 guys.
Yeah.
Charlie Carr. I mean, that offense, man, they could have a lot of high-level prospects.
As a Hawkeye fan, you kind of fear the coming year, I'll be honest with you. So. Ian Cumming from ProFootballNetwork.com. Hey, enjoy the draft tomorrow night, and thanks for calling, buddy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thanks for having me on.